the world is incredibly abundant, but you don't get all the world. At some point in time, I didn't see reality. And there's probably parts of my life right now where I don't see reality.
Welcome back to another episode of the New Rules podcast. It's your girl, Breezy. How are you doing today, Mr. Christopher Adrian Crawford?
Wow, my full government name. Appreciate that for everybody out there. Good. Freaking busy and sick. So it's just, it's what it is. It's life. So I'm excited.
Well, today we're going to take a fun approach to the podcast.
Okay.
Today you and I were talking about what topic it is that we wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And usually we pick a leadership topic we kind of want to focus on and then go with the flow from there. But I was like, morbidly, I've been thinking about...
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about this. Keep going.
Okay. Do you want me... Is that okay if I...
No, go for it.
Morbidly, I was like, okay, when I do these podcasts, some of the framework in my mind is what would I want to ask you about this topic if something were to happen to you or something happened to you, what would I regret not asking you about this topic? And so we talked about what would it be like to do an episode that just kind of had a lot of those random miscellaneous life questions that I have that opportunity.
Sweet. Well, I'm glad to be able to answer that, even though it's a little bit morbid, but I get it, because I think that sometimes in life, life does happen. And even if it's not, death or something like that, it's just, life starts to speed up. And many times you like, if I could have had this opportunity, I look back in my life and I was around certain people that I wish I would have had the opportunity to ask them more questions. So, so I'm totally for it. Let's get to it. Yeah.
So the first one is a fun one. If your life was a movie, what title would encapsulate it?
It's a very good question. The title? It would probably be the name of this podcast. It would be New Rules. Yeah. I think that's what I would title it. Now, there'd probably be like a sentence underneath it or something like that explaining it, but for sure, like it would be New Rules. Yeah.
Who would play you?
Idris Elba, for sure. Idris Elba.
That's incredible.
100% Idris Elba. Yeah. I got a slight man crush on Idris Elba. Secure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Pause. But I do have a slight man crush on Idris Elba. I do.
Okay. So to start us off, what is kind of a piece of advice for each of the decades of life? But we'll just focus on 20s, 30s, and 40s. So a piece of advice for each of those decades.
That I would give to myself or anybody at 20?
To anybody.
I would say that in your 20s, work. Just drop your head and work. I think so many times we're always worried about getting there. And I remember in my 20s, I was always just worried about getting to whatever place that was. And if you're in your 20s, I would just say, man, drop your head, what's in front of you, and just work your face off. Because I think what that does, you'll learn skill sets and things that you will need in your 30s, 40s, and 50s. And so I would tell you to do that. I would say in your 30s to start looking at where you're producing results at. I think in your 20s, you try a bunch of different things, and you're pushing out. But in your 30s, you start to hone in and try to hone in what are my real skill sets and really start to try to craft those really, really well. In your 40s, what I would tell you is that your 40s right now, what I'm saying to myself in my 40s is that this is the time to where you are building, where you get to really see the results. I would tell people you get to see results of a lot of work if you do it right in your 40s, and especially in your 50s. So that's what I would say.
Okay, so some of these questions are actually from a few different people that I reach out to on questions that they would like to ask you if they have the opportunity. So I am going to throw a few of those in there.
Let's do it.
So what is a practice that has helped you communicate hard information to a loved one? And in the case that it doesn't go well, how do you navigate your emotions?
Great question. I think that one of the things is always a mindset. And my mindset is that I'm not they're not my enemy, but I'm actually trying to help them. And so sometimes that kind of frames the conversation for me, because if I know the person and I'm trying to help them, then that frames how I approach them. And I'm not there to kind of be their enemy. I think a lot of times when we have difficult things to say, we can, without realizing, we make people our enemy. And so then we feel like we have to say it so harsh, or we feel like we have to, put underhand jabs with it. Or the other part too is that I think sometimes we if you care about somebody, you'll say it directly versus kind of like beating around the bush, because a lot of times we beat around the bush in certain conversations is because we care more about us than we care about them. We care more about what they're going to think or how they're going to feel and how they're going to look at me or look at us now versus this really helping them. So I would do that. You need to remind yourself that you're not responsible for their response. You're responsible for delivering information, what you feel is true, if they've given you access to tell them truth or to speak to them. But how they respond, that's on them. Now, again, you have to evaluate yourself. Did you do it in a way that was loving, caring? And again, loving and caring does not mean like your voice was lower or you were softer with how you say it. A lot of times I say things super direct to people, but I think they can feel that it's actually love underneath it. So I think that's really important, to understand that you're not responsible for their response. And so I think you have to constantly remind yourself of that once it happens. And going into the conversation, because I think a lot of times what we want, we have an expectation of their response. And when that response doesn't work or that response doesn't happen, then we get super disappointed. It creates this chasm in between. And then that's where like the mess up parts come in, because we go in expecting their response is going to be great, and then it doesn't, and then all of a sudden you feel just terrible about it. And so you got to remind yourself going into it, like they can respond however, but you're not responsible for that.
How do you think that differs based on role? So there's relationships where somebody is a friend, so they're an equal, or maybe you're in a relationship where you are the boss or somebody else is the boss. Yeah.
Well, I think if it's a friend, or if, I'll give you an example, like with my children. One of the things that I've been doing lately with my children, that if it's detrimental to them and I see something, I'm going to speak very clearly about it. But when they come to me and they're asking me and they're like, hey, whether if they're venting something, communicating, I ask the question, are you want me to listen to you? Or am I just like, do you just want me to be a listening ear right now? Or do you actually want me to like give you advice and help you? So in those moments, because they came to me, I give them the option. I give them the advocacy of what they want to do. And if they say, no, I want you to, give me, if I want you to speak truth, then I'm very direct with them and tell them what I think. If it's somebody who's a direct report to me, a lot of times what I'll do is I just speak truth right from the beginning. Because I think the whole thing, I don't believe in the whole encouragement sandwich, encourage them, correct them, encourage them. Because here's why. I think Adam Grant said it best. Like, if everybody knows you're going to be correcting them, so like they're all just waiting with anxiety about what the heck you're about to say, so they don't even hear the encouragement. And then once you give them they're waiting for the actual like correction. Then when you give them the correction, they're so mentally and emotionally messed up, they're not even hearing the encouragement on the back end of it. So it's like a waste of time. So I tell people, just go straight forward. In the way that you're wired, and communicate those things and say it, and then you just be really, really direct with them.
Okay, so you are someone who always drives to create better realities, and we talk about this a lot on the podcast, that feeling satisfied is something that is very challenging for you. Mm-hmm. So there are some roles that you fulfill in your life, like a creator, a CEO, where that attribute is so helpful.
Yep.
And then there are some roles in your life where that attribute is very challenging. How do you navigate kind of embracing that skill about yourself? And then also, in your relationships, especially with like your spouse and your children, how do you still express like love and gratitude for them as they are, while still having a hope and a push towards a better future?
Well, I think that it's understanding. I always have to go to my own intent first. Whenever I start feeling really anxious about, like, say it's someone like, well, if it's like my spouse or my kids or someone close to me, right? And they're not changing, or I really want to see something happen, a lot of times there's something going on inside of me. There's a lot of times I'm feeling some type of way, and I need to identify that, because whenever I'm getting anxious or I start feeling like, okay, I got to have this conversation, I got to talk to them, they got to really change, they got to do this, and I start getting impatient with them, it's because of how it's making me feel. And so I have to remind myself that it's not about how it makes me feel. The other thing, though, is that as far as in casting a vision for them, like, I want to cast a vision for them just like I do everyone else, but they have to have the responsibility, and they have the choice if they want to like do that or not, or listen or not. I say it all the time. I want my children to choose me as their consultants, right? Like I want them to like, no, I want you to help me. And so that just takes time. It takes patience, but it is hard. I'm not going to say it's easy, because sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, like you're seeing life. It could be so much better if you did it this way. But I think that I try to just keep perspective of that. At some point in time, I didn't see reality. And there's probably parts of my life right now where I don't see reality. So I try to give them room there.
There is a statement that I think we can all make at times, like, this person or this person or this person doesn't love me for who I am, or they don't understand me for who I am, which is kind of stating that an expectation in my relationships is that somebody loves me for who I am. Do you think that is a fair expectation? What do you think that that means?
I think when people say that they need to love me for who I am, I think a lot of times it's a deeper cry that people don't feel like they're known. And so I think when they're saying that, they're just like, they want to be known more by the person. And I think that's the first thing. I think that's where people have to maybe ask a deeper question. Okay, well, where don't you feel like I'm loving you for who you are? And what part am I not seeing? So sometimes you have to become a little bit more aware of that. I think the other part of that is being in a relationship. That's the part of a relationship. It's the whole idea, iron sharpens iron. So yeah, there's parts of who you are that aren't okay. You know, like for me, there's parts of me, and there were parts of me early in my marriage and parts of me now where like, I'm still selfish. And I could just be like, well, it's just how I was. And you know, and you just got to love me for who I am. Like, no, like you're a douche. Like, so stop being that way. You know what I'm saying? Like you can't be that. You can't do that. And so I think that it's a two-way street in a relationship. So yes, I think people need to understand you more, but I also think you have to have an expectation as well that you do need to change, because that's a relationship. Relationships are always evolving and getting better. And if somebody's in your life, yeah, they should help you get better. And not every way that you are is like, you know, it's not okay. It's, you know, maybe there's places where you're actually harmful for people. Maybe, you know, the way I am, like my family was very, you know, like we just yelled all the time, right? Okay. And that's how we got our point across. Well, that doesn't mean it's okay. Just because you grew up like that doesn't mean it's okay. You know what I mean? Because like maybe a lot of people don't have to communicate that way or function that way. And so that's a way you have to get better. So I think you have to, first of all, tell the person like where you feel like they're missing you at. And then also you have to be ready to see change happen too, or be ready to want to have change happen.
You're somebody who deeply feels like and believes that your life should impact humanity. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, you're very ecclesiastical. Everything is meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What is the point of all of this?
Yes.
And I think that you feel both at a very deep level.
Mm-hmm.
How do you navigate those strong emotions that can seemingly be on different extremes?
Yeah, I think it's just about managing tension. I think that's just the human experience. I think that a lot of times in life, we want things to just be so black and white in boxes and clear, and it's not. It's very messy. And I've learned in my life that it's the beauty of, like, for me, my human soul. The human parts of me is like, man, like I really want to see the world change. I'm not satisfied with where it's at. And I want to make an impact while I'm here. But also I have perspective too, that like in the end, like it keeps everything in perspective for me. Because certain things, like, yeah, it doesn't matter. At the end of my life, like, yeah, like how many followers I have on Instagram and all that stuff like that doesn't really matter. And so I can like say, that stuff's meaningless, right? It also helps me understand what's really important, like what are really, really important for me. And so I think it's just a dichotomy of the human soul, and I just learned how to manage the tension. Sometimes I'm on a wave of like, man, I want to change the world. Sometimes I'm on the wave of like, the world sucks and I can't stand it. And that's just how I'm wired. The key for me, though, is not letting the ditch get too deep when I'm on the negative wave, and not the wave get so high, because I can get way too optimistic, or I can just get way too doom and gloom. And it's managing that tension. And so that's why I tell people how I do this is a constant managing tension. It's riding the wave. Sometimes I'm in a low point, so I have to ride that wave. I can't just be like, just stop being down and thinking the world sucks. Like, no, I try to find out, why do I feel this way? Why am I feeling this way right now? And then when I'm on a wave that's going up, like, why am I wanting to impact the world right now? What's going on? So it's like I manage the tension by looking deep within and figure out what's happening inside of me.
What are things that tell you you're on the trajectory of an extreme?
Right now, physically. Like my body, more than I've ever known, like speaks to you, like the whole idea the body keeps a score or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But like you thought that stuff was like stupid. I was like, man, nobody, whatever, that crap's dumb. Like the body didn't keep the score. You just get through it. Like it's painful, whatever, right? But no, like my body literally tells me. So like I can tell like in my like I start to feel in my mood, like start to like it literally physically drop. My body will start to even like now hurt when I start to get in those negative spots. I really get excited. My body feels really good when I'm in a high point, in a high moment. So honestly, right now, it's really about how my body actually feels. It really kind of helps me do it.
Is there a mental quality of 20-year-old Adrian that you wish you still embodied today?
Yeah. 20-year-old Adrian really believed that like I could change anything. 45-year-old Adrian has had 25 years of life and realizing that, yeah, there's a lot of things you can't change. But I remember being blindly ignorant, and I actually like that. Just like, yeah, I think I can do anything. I think I could change the world. I think I can, this can happen. Why do we have to do it this way? Nope, the whole world can be different. And so I wish I still had some of that in me, because I think sometimes like I can become way more of a pessimist. But yeah, I wish I still kind of like I had like that belief a little bit more.
Are there any opportunities that that escaped you that you wish you chased after?
Wow, that's a great question. I don't think there's opportunities that I didn't chase. I think there's opportunity. I think there's things I did that I didn't chase enough. I didn't get the most out of them because I was always worried about what was coming ahead. I was always worried about getting to the next spot. So I did not get what I needed to get, or to, like I said, like to mine out everything I could have in each situation I was in, because I was always worried about, okay, well, I'm always thinking about the next thing, and is this really what I'm supposed to do with my life, and da-da-da, versus just being in that moment and mining all of it and just being present in doing that. Like that part, for me, if I go back, I wish I did. I wish I would have been way more present and not thinking so much about what's next, but being right there. And I think I think there's a lot more I could have mined out during those times that I didn't.
Can you give an example of what it is you would be doing? And if you were to have kind of seized that, what would you have now?
I think I would have had a lot more wisdom a lot faster. I think I would have had a lot more resilience a lot faster. I think practically, financially, I would have been farther along faster. I think physically, my body wouldn't be in the place where it's at right now, where I'm having to rewire all of it, because I think I broke my body down by worrying so much about stuff that I didn't need to worry about. And so I think those are some of the things I kind of lost or could have gained.
How do you think that you've started to alter some of your behavior without allowing the shame of what you wish you did sooner to crush you?
We get in shame because of our past, or we worry about our future. That's where fear comes. And I think what I've been trying to work so much on is trying to be right there in the moment, like trying to enjoy it, trying to see what I can learn from it, and honestly not allowing the worry, the doubt, the pain of the past even to, because when you start getting ashamed, then that puts like anxiety on you, that puts a bunch of stuff, and it starts to impact you. And honestly, like my body has been so worn down because of not work, but because of my worries, my fears, a lot of fear that I've lived in. Like I physically can't really do it. I have to I if I stay in those places, man, it starts to really hurt my body. So my body is the biggest thing for me now, telling me like, nope. Like when I start getting those places, it's like, all right, well, you can be in a lot of pain today if you want to worry about this, or you could be right here in the moment. So that's really helped me a lot.
What's a minor practice that you've implemented since you were younger that over time has shown to alter the trajectory of your leadership capacity?
The power of why. Like it's probably the single most important thing that I implement in my life is when I feel and felt some type of way, I try to get to the basement of why. Why am I feeling this way? What's happening inside of me? Why am I angry? Okay, I'm angry at this person. Why am I angry at this person? What did this person say? Okay, why did they say what they said? Why did it make me feel this way? okay, and what they said made me feel this way, then, why did I react this way? Why, when people do say this, I react? And is this a pattern? Yeah, I get to the why, and that's allowed me to really get to the basement of see life messaging. And it's also allowed me to have real data. I think so many times when we don't get to the basement of what's really bothering us or what's happening or why we feel the way we feel, we have skewed data. We don't see the world right. We don't see relationships right. We don't see business opportunities right. We don't see leadership right. And so that single practice of the power of why. So I asked myself why 5 times has been one thing, has changed me. And the second thing is honestly, is just, I call it 5 minutes of real, of where like literally I just vent about where I'm at, good, bad, or indifferent. And so for me, I pray this for other people. Maybe you just, voice record, whatever, but it allows you to become aware. And I think those 2 practices have really changed my life.
Are there any topics that you haven't taught on because you don't believe it's the right time yet?
I don't think I've taught all I want to teach on when it comes to actual, like, how do you build real, like, diverse worlds. I don't think I've fully taught on it because I think we live in such right now a crazy society that when you start even bringing up anything about race, diversity, whatever, people go to extremes. The right goes to, like I said, DEI is like the new N-word, and it's like on the other side of it, on the left, it's like they take the word diversity and now you clump everything in the freaking world to it, right? And I haven't taught about it. Like if I could just talk very plainly, at times people feel like I do, but a lot of times I don't. Like I'll talk plainly about I'm so sick of like everybody clumping everybody's issue into one thing. Legitimately, I would talk about this. One thing that's frustrated me a ton is I feel like in our country, when there becomes an issue around, say, Black people, it's like every other minority group gets clumped into it at times. Not everyone, but a lot of the minority groups get clumped into it. And like I really would talk a ton about that. Why do people do that? Why do they latch on to that? You know what I mean? And what I saw and see the detriment of what that has caused and hindered within the Black community, I would talk a lot more about that because I just have seen it, and I've seen it become a real travesty and a real impact. And I think it's actually set us back. I think it's set the idea of race and racial reconciliation and diversity back years because I think people during 2020 attach all these other agendas to an agenda that started off about the treatment of Black people, and then it became about everybody, and then I think it got watered down, and then who hits it on the front end? Black people get hit. They get the ones that miss out, and this has kind of happened throughout history.
So it didn't seem like when I asked that question in your head you had necessarily like this long list of things that you've held back. Mm-hmm. Do you think some of that has to do with your courage to teach things that you maybe don't want to, but you can like pinpoint when you're not doing it because you feel uncomfortable versus when it might be needed for the audience to hear it? I
think that a lot of times I talk about things ahead of their time. But also I don't feel comfortable. My body feels off after a while when I'm not speaking what I really feel and think. And so I don't have a long list of stuff because I feel like I really try to speak it. And sometimes that's ahead of its time. That's why one of my favorite Jay-Z songs is like On to the Next One, because like I legit like I've talked about stuff and then 3 or 4 years later it becomes a wave, and then people start riding that wave, and then I'm just on to the next thing. And so I don't know. I've been very fortunate that I think that I can see things before they get there. And I like to talk about them, and because I feel like I'm called to help prepare people for what's coming. And so a lot of times I just, whatever's there, I speak it and communicate it.
How old were you when you began communicating?
22.
At that point, did you have that belief that your role was to communicate?
I don't think I had the belief that my role was communicate. What I did, though, the second time I communicated, or when I communicated, let me say this. When I communicated for the first time, it was the second thing I did in my life that felt right. First time I was picking up a basketball. That was the second thing, was when I started talking and I was communicating in front of people. Even though I was always fearful of communicating to people, I realized I had a gift to be able to do that. And so I wouldn't say that I knew it was the to communicate like things in the future or, you know, kind of whatever. I think that came with time. But I knew like at 22 that like, man, that there was something that was a gift.
If you had to pinpoint when you realized that what you were talking about wouldn't always be understood by the majority in the current moment, about how old would you say that you were? I
was in my mid-30s where I started realizing, I'm like, yeah, because I kept thinking, oh, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. And I realized, like, no, it's not. It's literally not. It's going to be, I'll be talking about stuff ahead. And here's why. It's because it just is a constant killer of the thing deep within me that's toxic. The toxic part of me is I want, because of my, you know, my life messaging, I just want to be seen. I want to be known. And so because of that, communicating things before they get there, people think you're crazy. People think, oh, of course they're not paying attention to you. You know, there may be some people who believe in it, but others don't, right? And you look like, oh, what? I'm not seen, I'm not known, I'm rejected. And so a lot of times it just kills the toxic part of me because deep inside, I just want you to think what I'm saying is so profound. Why? Because it feels like it brings me validation. And so I just think talking ahead of those things is just a constant messaging of where I feel like that it kills the toxic parts of me internally.
Where is there a yes in your life that you want to say, but you're not saying it?
I would say I'm not saying yes right now to stepping out. Well, as a matter of fact, it comes back to a conversation me and you had like a few months ago. And we were at Lucky Goat. And I asked you a question. I'm like, and I was like, and I think the question was from a book I was reading. And I was like, what's one of the things that like, I think like hinder me from growing, whatever. And you made the statement. You're like, you always talk about people being one of one. And then you were very complimentary. You're like, I think you are one of one. You don't see yourself as one of one. So I don't think you walk into environments that you should walk in. Not because you can't be there. It's just you don't think you should be there, so you don't do it. That's why I don't say yes. Because I feel like I can be in certain environments right now, but at times my makeup won't let me do it. I feel like I'm getting better at it, but I feel like, man, when I go in there, I'm like, well, what do I really have to offer? And I start feeling some type of way instead of walking in there being like living fearless and like, no, I got something to offer. If I didn't, then I wouldn't be here. So I'm trying to get better at that, but I feel like there are more opportunities for me to do that. But it's just taking that risk, and it's jumping off the porch and figuring out, do I got it or not, and go from there. So,
do you feel like some of how you learn that is by putting yourself in the position where maybe you're in more rooms where you are the least common denominator, like in certain areas, and the more that you do it, the more comfortable you are because it forces you to have to realize like, but these are the things that I am one of one at? Yeah,
I mean, it is. And I think it's the more you're in rooms, the more you get to see people who are really good at certain things. And then also being in those rooms, like, so I answer your question, yes, but then also being in those rooms when you get in them, and I don't know why this always hits me like later, but like when I'm in those rooms, a lot of times I'm not really impressed with people because they're really not what I thought they were. They're good at maybe one thing, but they're not good at this, and they can come off as they're good at like all this stuff. And so I think that's what happens when I get in the rooms with people. You get to actually see who they are and how good they really are, and you get to see they're good at this thing, maybe not this thing. And so I think the more I'm in there, the more like kind of understanding it gives me of my skill set, what I'm really good at, what I'm not good at. So I think that's what makes it helpful.
What are habits that you have right now that you believe could be hindering you from experiencing the fullness of gifts that God has given you?
That's a good question. I think my concern for people's perception of me. I think that's always going to be the thing for me, that if I can continue to rid myself of that, I think that's more of the impact I can make. I just have seen people live in a vacuum and make decisions and like not think about other people and how that can impact them. And so I think I live so fearful of that. I don't want people to, one, I don't want to be a leader that's so blinded that like I'm harming people, but also I think I do it too because like it gives me an excuse. It gives me an excuse to not like step out there and are like, yo, if you got it, you got it. If you don't, you don't. And people may be upset with you. And it's not that I'm trying to make people upset, but I think sometimes I can just hide behind that because I'm really, again, my toxic part, I just want you to like me and I want to be known by you and be okay and be validated by people. But I've come to realize that where I feel like that I'm supposed to go and what I feel like God may have for me, there's just going to be people that don't like you. I read something recently about that. People have way more empathy for you when you fail. They don't when you're successful. Like people have such a crazy view. When you think about it, whenever you see somebody successful, it's just everything negative they're doing and how bad they are. When someone fails, you're like, now a little bit the mob will come out, but afterwards people are like, oh, it's like the redemption tour. Versus like if you're moving forward, man, the level of what just comes with that. And I think so many times I don't know if I want that. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if do I have thick enough skin to do that? So I think that's the thing. I think probably to kind of get it all to one point is like, I think I've got to grow and have thicker skin to do what I think. And if I don't, I mean, I still think there'll be good things I do, but I don't think I'll maximize what God has called me to do in this life.
In a little bit of a similar vein, but before I ask the question, I'll say, even though faith is not a explicit conversation consistently on this podcast, it is a very important component to your life.
Yep.
And I think that regardless of whether you are a person of faith, the answers that you're giving are going to be incredibly valuable and have so much wisdom in them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I mean, my life is centered around my belief in Jesus. Like, and what I've hoped to try to do for people is I'm unashamed of that, but I don't talk about it all the time because what I want to, and what I mean by that is that if somebody asks me, I'm unapologetic. But what I've tried to do is I think so many times like faith and quote unquote like regular life have been separated, and I don't see it that way. It's not separated from me. Like I'm a human being, and being a human being that has this faith and this belief in Jesus, everything flows out of that. And I just know how to translate that into just like life. I know how to translate that when I'm talking to people, how I treat people, how you run a business, how you care for friendships, how you care for your community, man, how do you deal with rejection, how you deal with emotionality. All of that comes from this deep place of faith, and that realizing that I believe that there is something far greater that I'm under authority to. I think when you are the greatest authority in your life, that's a scary place because I know how broken I am. And so me being the final authority to make every decision or like define truth and all that stuff, like that's freaking crazy because I know how dark I can be. Having something greater that I'm under the authority of has been one of the freeingest things for me in my life. And I think so many times people see that as like they see God or they see the Bible or whatever as this hindering thing, but it's actually a place of freedom because listen, people walk in freedom when you have boundaries. When you don't have boundaries, that's not freedom. It's actually slavery when you don't have boundaries. When you just do whatever you want, whenever you want, you end up becoming a slave to whatever things become, whatever you want to do. And so you go from this thing to this thing, and then that thing becomes like the thing that keeps you locked up. And for me, being under the authority of something else, something far greater than me, has been one of the greatest places of freedom, and it leads all parts of my life.
Based on your pursuit of wisdom and living within the boundaries that God has placed inside of your life, what is the thing that, in your perspective, if like that God knows, if I give this to Adrian Crawford, he is going to just like do the absolute best with this thing, and I know that I can entrust him with this.
Mm-hmm. What is it?
Yeah, what do you think that is?
Power. Because I want to give it to people. I want to give power to people who don't have it. I want to give opportunities to people who couldn't do it on themselves. And I feel like over years I've done that. That I've like been someone that I've tried to live my life for the betterment of others, of using the gifts, skills, and talents that I've been given, and to like give that away to people, create platforms for people, opportunities for people. So yeah, if God would give me power, influence, I feel like that's where I would take it and give it away, and give it away as much as I can, and create. And then like just the more I got, the more I wanted to give it away to people so they could go do it, and then hopefully they would do the same thing.
In a similar vein, you're kind of approaching the phase of your life where you at least start to wonder, what is this world or this legacy that I've created going to look like when I'm no longer here? Mm-hmm. When you think about that, what kind of person do you imagine kind of continuing that legacy or the worlds that you've created?
That they would see the importance of giving away, like creating worlds, not for yourself, but for others. And someone willing to do that, and also just investing into the next generation. Like that is my life's pursuit, is to create platforms really for the next generation. Because I believe that I had a few people do that for me, and I am where I am because people were willing to do that for me. And I hope that that's what, that others would do, that they would take the skill set, the ability, the resources, the whatever they had and whatever they've learned, and they would actually go give it away to other people and continue to build platforms that way. Because I think that's how society and humanity gets better, when you do things like that.
We talked about this a little bit already, but I would love for you to go into it deeper. Mm-hmm. To you, what is the cost of failure and what is the cost of success?
I think the cost of failure, the big cost of it, is if you don't learn from it. I think, and the same thing of success. I think the cost of it, meaning that a couple of things. I think the negative cost of it would be on both success and failure is if you don't learn. How were you successful? What did you do? And in failure, what happened? And what did you, why did you get to this place? I think doing the autopsy of it, good or bad, is important. The other side of it, of what is the actual other cost to this? Most people don't count it before they get into it and have realistic views with your eyes wide open of what it's going to take and what it will actually cost you. We live in a world today where we think like we can do everything and we have this unlimited supply. And I think so many times you don't realize oh no, for me to make an impact right now in my 20s where I want to build a successful career or business, that means, hey, your social life will probably take a hit at some level, right? Or when you decide, if you decide when you decide to have children, right? And when you decide to have children, the reality of man, my life is going to look different now because I have a child, have someone else to take care of, and whatever. When you get married, what is that going to cost you? Most of the people are like, oh man, I'm super excited about getting married. But then they don't think about, when you do get married, here are things you're giving up too. Here's things you get to gain, but you're also giving stuff up as well. So I think most people don't look at situations, failure, success, or any opportunities and realize it and do a real audit to say, okay, when I do this is what it's going to cost me. Good or bad, you know what I'm saying? This is what it's going to do. And I think that's what's going to be really important for people, is that don't go into it thinking you can just do everything. You're going to give stuff up, and you have to know what that is, and you have to be okay with it. Because if not, when you lose it, you get turned upside down because you went into it ignorant. Instead of being honest with yourself, saying, this is what I'm going to lose, this is what I'm going to gain. And the cost-benefit analysis, is it worth it for me?
At the end of the day, what are the three main things that matter in this life?
I think these are three important things. I think one, ask yourself what happens when I die. Is there an afterlife? Is there a God? Who is that God? What does it mean to serve that God? I think that's really important. I think the second thing is, do you ever find out what you're designed to be? Do you know who you actually are and what you've been designed to do? I think the third thing is that did you make an impact? It is so important in your life to actually know that you impacted others. I think those are the three most important things. That you impact others, that you find out why you were designed, and that actually do you know who your God is. I think those are three most important things.
Okay, so a little fun one to roll us out.
Yep.
Trend predictions. We're entering into 2025.
Yep.
What do you believe has happened in 2024? And where do we find ourselves?
I think we're finding ourselves in a place to where the world is incredibly abundant, but you don't get all the world. I think what we're coming to reality in our world is this. The internet has created where we have access to everything. We have access to see things. We have access to know information. It doesn't mean you get it. It doesn't mean you get to have all these things. And I think people are starting to understand their limitations. And I think people fight against that. I think they're going to fight that, and then they're going to be turned. I think people are getting turned upside down. We're seeing it from a global standpoint where, I mean, America, I mean, right now, we're like on so many different fronts with wars, right? Of potential, with, Israel and what's happening with Hamas, and then Russia and Ukraine. And then there's always China, Taiwan. There's little skirmishes in South America. I mean, it's everywhere. And what we're coming to is like, oh, we can't fight every war anymore. And I think that goes to that's a global picture to go to a smaller picture of that. I think most people are there. People still want to feel like they can do everything, and they're starting to realize their limits. And I think that's causing people not to know how to act, because they were told we can do anything we want to be, and life is smacking them in the face. And so I think that's leading to more mental health crises that are actually happening into the world. I think the other trends that will happen, I think COVID was one of 2020 was a shaking. And then I think we've gotten kind of level a little bit, right? And I think there's about to be another one. Now, what that looks like, I don't know. Could that be parts of, some people think it could be internet outages, power stuff, if China, Taiwan go to war, what does that look like? I mean, those are all kind of things that are there. But I do think there'll be another shaking that actually happens that rattles kind of the way things are. So I think people we're kind of starting to figure it out, but I think they're not there. Fun stuff for me. I'm like really involved right now in helping some athletic departments figure out the future. I mean, I'm in this world. So fun thing for me is it's the Wild West now. It is the literal college athletics is the Wild West. And I think that there are new models that are going to emerge. And the problem right now in that world is everybody's trying to be half pregnant. They want the old model and the new model and trying to make it work. And it's like, you can't be half pregnant. Either you have to go all in or you don't. And I think that's what's happening there. But I think that's happening in almost every industry. Things are changing, and people still want the old world. They want some of the old structures of how things were, but then they want this. They want the hierarchy, but then they want more egalitarian ways of doing things versus saying, no. You got to figure out who you are, and then you got to go all in. And so being in that world right now, it's really fun for me because it really is the Wild West. And I love that. I love being in a place where there's no rules right now because you get to write them. And you get to set them, and you get to build them out. And so I think that's what's happening. I still think that we are going to see more industry disrupted, and there's going to be a lot of opportunities for innovation, a lot of opportunities for new technology, a lot of opportunities for new leaders to emerge. And I think that's, I've been saying this for a long time. Those in the future who lead will be those who are authentic. They know who they are. They have self-awareness. They have power. There's such a green space for that. Another trend I think will be over the next couple of years is that there's going to emerge some political candidates that come about that you don't know where they land. You don't know if they're Republican or Democrat. They literally will have Republican viewpoints and Democratic viewpoints, and you can't figure them out. And I think they're going to start winning some elections because I think it's a green space that's wide open. I've been saying this before. Fear is really the new currency, but there are people really just wanting a breath of fresh air. And I think there's going to be some who emerge to actually do that in different ways and different leadership. And I think they're going to be ones who make a real impact. So those are just very random thoughts. So that's kind of where I'm at. So anyway, what about you? What trends do you see happening?
Oh, mine are
I know you're what? What's it, like,
Fluffy.
Fluffy. All right, give me some of your fluffy ones. Let's go.
Mine's like pop culture.
All right, let's go.
So one of my predictions before 2024 started was that this would be the year that Miley Cyrus becomes more credible to the public eye again.
Wow.
And
somewhere, hey,
I say so that has begun, as she has been featured on Beyonce's album, and she recently won her first Grammy.
Wow. In the words of Jay-Z, somewhere in America, Miley Cyrus is still twerking.
Oh, one of my other ones was that early 2000s pop music is back. The pop girlies are back. We are going to have modern day versions of Britney Spears, Lady Gaga, Nelly.
Dude, that is wild because it doesn't seem like it's that long ago, but it really is.
It is. Like I'm 20, still living off of Oops, I Did It Again.
Yeah, like it's 20. I mean, like legitimately, that's the equivalent of me when like in 2004, that's the equivalent when Michael Jackson, 20 years later, when Michael Jackson did like Thriller.
And I also think that universally we have bullied theater kids, respectfully.
Right.
And I think that this is the year that theater kids gain respect because Olivia Rodrigo, Sabrina Carpenter, Renee Rapp, Lola Tung from The Summer I Turned Pretty, all of them are like theater girls.
Yep.
And so I think that, you know, socially we're going to be a little bit less mean. I think that Northwest will be a creative director or have her own, like something crazy that's really good. Whether it's like her own album, she does a fashion line, maybe she designs her mom's Met Gala dress. Like she just does something like that. And like her she's so talented. Dude. And multi-talented that I think there's going to be something serious that happens.
She is. My freaking 13-year-old just walks around all the time. It's your bestie.
Miss Westie. I think that Hailey Bieber will be more respected this year too. I think that she's been like pretty bullied, and the tables have already started to turn for the masses as far as like Selena Gomez has kind of like muted herself a little bit more on social media. She's planning on selling or merging Rare Beauty, which is one of her big things. And Hailey Bieber started Rode Beauty, all these different things. So I think that they'll kind of transition to her no longer being the other woman, even though she's been married to him for like so long.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I have a few different more, but that's generally. Oh, I think belly button rings. Belly button rings are coming back, you guys.
Oh my God.
They're coming back.
Where did we just go? I was all right with some of these other things. You go to belly. No.
Jewelry. I mean, jewelry, fashion. Okay. I'm not saying I'm getting one. I'm just saying that people, there's like belly button rings go back and forth between being like tongue rings. Like there's different cultural times where they're like really cool and like whatever, and times where they're like, that's disgusting.
Wow.
I think boat shoes.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, similar to cowboy boots, I think boat shoes are going to come back. Vera Bradley.
Okay.
You know what Vera Bradley is?
Yep.
Unfortunately, I think that remember when people used to wear shorts with tights?
Oh God.
I think shorts with tights are going to come back. And then I also think magazines, printed subscriptions. I think people are going to like kind of fetish over newspapers and magazines and stuff like that. And so finally all of our friends who, you know, work in the newspaper and stuff are going to be back on it.
Yeah. It's interesting. My only pop culture thing I'd say is that as we were recording this a couple of days ago, J. Cole at Dreamville, you know, he put out this album and, you know, him and Kendrick Lamar have been going back and forth, and he actually got on stage and pretty much, man, like, I mean, he does something that people do not do in rap, but you're actually starting to see a different trend where he was like, man, he apologized. He's like, I didn't want to do that. And he actually was very honest about, I felt the pressure from my friends to the internet. If you got to respond, he's like, I don't have any issue with Kendrick. Man, he took a shot, no big deal.
He's a good dude.
Yeah. And it's just like, he's like, man, he's like, this whole album, I loved it. But that one, he's like, I feel like my album he just did was a masterpiece. He's like, but the one shot he made at Kendrick on 7 Minute Drill, he's like, that's the one negative of it, because I didn't feel right in my spirit doing it. I didn't want to respond to him. He's like, you can even hear me. He's like, I kind of like said some stuff, but he's like, I demean his work. He's like, he's one of the best MCs of all time. And for a fact of a rapper to come up there and say no, and to do that, but also the conscious awareness of saying, no, we're no longer going to allow like the pressure. That's what I was saying. He's being authentic. I'm not going to let the pressure of everybody else. And when I make a mistake, I own that. That's not me in doing that. And so I thought that was like, it was really interesting. And then, everybody's got, all their hot takes. You got the old head saying, that's why hip hop and life is so soft. You got other people saying, it's amazing. Then you got it's the internet's everybody's got an opinion about it. But I actually thought that was actually an interesting time and take. So we'll see what Drake does. I mean, he's definitely
Drake.
God, we could do a whole podcast on that Joker. But anyway, all right, guys. Well, hey, I hope today was helpful. Again, these were actually very interesting questions to do and to kind of go through it. So hopefully there was some wisdom that actually you could take from it, or a couple things, and then try to apply it. But until next time, keep writing the rules.